December 23, 2015. Tragedy struck the small town of Ellington, Connecticut. Connie DeBate, a beloved wife and mother, was found brutally murdered in her own home. The crime shocked the community and left investigators puzzled. This is the story of a cold case that remained unsolved for 7 long years until justice was finally served. Hi and welcome back to our channel. If you are new here, please consider subscribing, as it helps us motivate to create more intriguing content for you. Let's have a look at the 7-year-old cold case that was finally solved. On July 31, 1976, Connie was born in Rockville to Cindy and Kenneth. Marlies, Leslie, and Keith were Connie's 2 sisters and brother. Connie went to Ellington High School and earned her diploma there in 1995. Connie then enrolled at the University of Connecticut, where she earned her undergraduate degree in 1999 and started working for Reckitt Benckiser as a pharmaceutical sales representative. According to those who knew her, Connie was a kind and generous person who would go to great lengths to help the people she cared about. Connie was well-liked and had a large social circle. Connie was smitten when she revealed to her close friends in the early 2000s that she was dating Richard DeBate. He was a charming man who gave Connie royal treatment. After meeting Connie, Richard's family thought she was the one. Richard, sometimes known as Rick, was born on July 29, 1976 to Julie DeBate and Richard Sr. He was born and raised in Manchester, Connecticut, and he graduated from Manchester High School in 1995. Rick attended technical school after graduating from high school before starting a job in computer network administration. RJ and Connor were born to Rick and Connie, who wed on July 4, 2003. Rick appeared to be the ideal spouse and father figure for Connie's boys because she was a dedicated mother to them. The DeBates resided in a stunning residence on Birchview Drive in Ellington. Peggy and Darlene, 2 of Connie's best friends, lived in the same area, and their families got along well. Peggy and Darlene used to make fun of Rick for being such a devoted husband to Connie. From any angle, their lives appeared to be picture-perfect. On the morning of December 23, 2015, the day started off in a typical manner. With Christmas approaching in just 2 days, the atmosphere in Ellington was filled with joy and excitement on this Wednesday. Rick dropped Connor and RJ off at the neighboring bus station at 8:10 a.m. Connie got ready and went to a spin class at the neighborhood IMCA while he was away. What followed is uncertain because Rick has provided numerous contradictory accounts of what transpired. After the incident, he initially told investigators what follows. Rick dropped the boys off, went back home, and changed into his work attire. At 8:30 a.m., Rick, being fully prepared, returned to his car and embarked on a 40-minute journey to the office. Before long on the journey, he realized that his laptop was still at home. Rick was unable to complete his task without it, so he used his mobile device to email his boss to let him know he would be running late. Rick happened to see a security alert on his phone regarding a silent alarm that had gone off at his house. He also mentioned it in the email. Rick returned home and entered it with caution. After investigating, Rick discovered that the noise coming from upstairs sounded like someone was in their master bedroom. When Rick peeked inside the door, he found a disguised intruder standing there with him. The door was only partially open. According to Rick, the intruder was described as a tall man around 6 feet 2 inches in height, wearing dark green camouflage and a mask, made a threatening demand for money, wallet, and PIN numbers. The intruder also warned that if Rick didn't comply, he would wait for Rick's wife and kids. Rick reported that the intruder was armed with a knife. Rick compared the man's voice, which was deep. Less than a minute had passed after Rick had joined the intruder when he heard their garage door open. It was Connie, who had returned early due to the cancellation of her lesson. In a desperate attempt to warn his wife of the danger in their home, Rick yelled out to her. The intruder then appeared to focus on Connie, and he and Rick competed to get to her first. Rick was thrown down the steps during the battle and momentarily lost his bearings. He was able to get past him and follow Connie down the cellar. Rick managed to get to his feet and hurried to Connie's aid, but it was too late. There was a gunshot as he hurried down the steps. He had trouble hearing for several minutes because of how loud it sounded. After refocusing on Rick, the intruder employed a specific pressure point to overwhelm him and bring about his collapse. The next thing Rick knew, zip ties were holding him partially to a metal folding chair. Rick's body had suffered a few superficial cuts after the intruder had taken a box cutter from his toolbox. The intruder then took a blowtorch and started burning things. He then attempted to use the blowtorch on Rick, but Rick was able to seize the blowtorch with his free hand from the intruder. Despite Rick's earlier claim that the man was wearing a mask, he shot it at the man's face and burned him. Before Rick scared the man away following the blowtorch incident, the entire scenario lasted 5 minutes. As per the original schedule, it was expected to occur before 9:05 a.m. at the latest. Rick does not make a police call until 10:21 a.m. State troopers were already en route when the security firm automatically called them at 10:16 a.m. to inform them that an alarm had gone off at a customer's home. Why was this information not submitted to authorities immediately after the alert that Rick purportedly viewed just after 8:30 a.m.? A firefighter from the Ellington Fire Department was the first to respond at 7 Birchview Drive. Although the entrance door was open, the storm door was still closed. He entered after receiving no response when he knocked. A thin coating of smoke that hovered in the air caught his attention initially. Droplets of blood were flowing from the basement toward the kitchen through the open basement door. The man discovered Rick after following the path. Rick was on the kitchen floor face down and still fastened to the folding chair. In reference to the intruder, Rick informed the man that he was still inside the property. As soon as the man asked for assistance and identified the incident as a home invasion, a swarm of police officers arrived. They concentrated on finding the shooter as soon as they could. The detectives began making notes about every aspect of the home. They captured numerous pictures of Rick on the ground demonstrating how he was bound to the metal chair. Rick was strangely just zip-tied around his left hand and left ankle. Connie was located in the boiler room in the basement. She had received 2 gunshot wounds, one to the back of her head and one to the stomach. On-site medical personnel declared her dead. This was not just a house invasion anymore. Canine units arrived quickly, with the hope of pointing out to detectives where the shooter had fled. But it appeared as though the dog was only paying attention to Rick. Debates, one of the dogs, discovered Rick's wallet outside on the grass, likely where the intruder had left it when escaping. Even so, the dogs were unable to trace a scent that led outside of the property. Instead, they accompanied their captors to the ambulance where Rick was receiving care for his minor injuries. Investigators discovered gaps in Rick's story right away. The hospital in Hartford received Rick. He was first questioned about what happened that day at this location. He gave the authorities a description of the invader and revealed to them that he had witnessed the man shoot Connie in the basement. After Rick gave his version of the events, the detectives pressed him with some additional questions. At this point, they noted that Rick's story was slightly altering, which is always a warning sign. Upon noticing the alarm signal, Rick initially had doubts about the alarm system and wondered if he had inadvertently triggered it. According to Rick, he departed before Connie dropped off the boys. He then said he could not recall who had departed first. His explanation of the noises coming from upstairs was the next item to alter. When Rick initially walked in, there was silence. He went upstairs instead and saw that the bedroom light was on. He later discovered the intruder searching in their closet. It's important to note that Rick initially claimed he was shoved down the stairs, but now he changed his story. The gun tale was of utmost significance to the investigators. The firearm used to shoot Connie was a .357 Magnum. Rick had one of his own gun in the house. He initially admitted to the detectives that he was unsure of how the burglar obtained the gun from Connie. He now claimed to have witnessed Connie and the stranger scuffle for the rifle. The man took it from Connie before shooting her. Oh, and during all this, the basement was completely dark. Rick allegedly explained to detectives how he dragged himself up the stairs while still fastened to the metal chair. Upon regaining consciousness, he located his cell phone and dialed 911 while simultaneously phoning Connie's number in the hopes that she would return his call. Rick had conveniently placed wounds. Only his left side revealed the wounds to his chest, and his right hand could easily reach every leg wound. The investigators were interested in this. Additionally, he showed no signs of pushing or falling down the steps in terms of injuries. When he was sitting on the metal chair, the wounds from the box cutter would not have caused dried blood to flow down the borders of his legs as you might anticipate. The absence of blood leading up the stairs was another discrepancy that caught the attention of the investigators. There should be evidence that Rick had dragged himself from the cellar to the kitchen. There were only drips on that trail, and the only drag marks were in the kitchen. Before passing out in the kitchen, Rick appeared to have walked upstairs. Given that the pool of blood close to her body was undisturbed, the evidence indicates that he had not been in the area when she was shot. Investigators were trying to determine exactly how a burglar entered the home. As the rest of the house displayed no indication of a forced entry, they assumed that they had entered through an open basement window. Even this did not make sense. The basement window's locks were taken off from the inside and just left on the windowsill. Without causing serious harm, a burglar would not have been able to open these locks from the outside. Then why did Rick or Connie remove these locks without replacing them right away? Investigators frequently questioned the people closest to a victim to learn about their lives in general and any potential issues they may have been facing. The detectives went over what had happened that morning before asking Rick about his connection with Connie. He began by explaining that things had been fairly nice, but later added that Connie had recently been going through some difficulties. It was highly odd for the typically upbeat mother of two to be so easily irritated while she was dealing with depression. Rick mentioned that Connie seemed to be slowly returning to her previous state, indicating that she was gradually reclaiming her former self. The investigators then directly questioned Rick if his research would uncover any issues in their relationship, to which Rick replied, yes and no. Rick then admitted he had been having an affair, but he had a justification for it. He asserted that although he and Connie both desired to expand their family, health issues prevented them from doing so. After several unsuccessful attempts, they decided to take a new path because Connie was unable to conceive. Rick mentioned Sarah, a former classmate from high school who had just undergone a divorce, to the investigators. Rick said that he, Connie, and Sarah got together and devised a scheme for how Rick would become pregnant with Sarah. The group decided that Rick would have a sexual relationship with Sarah and become pregnant that way because the entire artificial insemination process was so expensive. He stated that Connie approved of the entire plan, even going so far as to say that it was primarily her idea. How then would parenting operate? It appears that they would co-parent the child together. The investigators found it difficult to make sense of such a peculiar tale and expressed doubt that Connie would consent to such a thing. Rick's account began to change once more as they probed him further about the circumstance. He informed them that their child was due in February 2016, but he evaded them when the detectives pressed him on whether Connie was aware of the pregnancy. Connie would have learned the good news as soon as Rick did if this had been her idea. Rick continued by stating that Connie and Sarah had never actually spoken. Once more, this exposed significant gaps in his account of Connie's participation in the scheme and their eventual co-parenting. The real narrative emerged by the end of the conversation. Before Connie died, Rick had been unfaithful to her for several years. Sarah's pregnancy was unintended as well. The investigators made no effort to conceal their skepticism. They informed Rick that the evidence at their house did not support what he said happened that morning and that his entire account was illogical. He adamantly denied any wrongdoing in relation to what happened to Connie. After learning of Rick's liaison, the detectives concentrated on finding Sarah. Later on that day, she was able to provide them with a statement. Sarah acknowledged being aware of Connie and Rick's marriage, but said Rick had informed her he was divorcing Connie. Rick explained to Sarah that he and Connie had been unhappy together for a long time and that they had decided to get a divorce. Sarah found out she was expecting on June 18, 2015, but she did not tell Rick until August. But when Rick learned, he told Sarah that he had just retained a divorce lawyer. This was a lie, just like so many other things had been. Before Connie passed away, Sarah and Rick were still together and even made a trip to Vermont in the middle of December 2015. The two talked about how they would tell Connie about this trip. Rick wanted to tell her after the holiday season. Investigators learned that Connie would never have approved of Rick conceiving a child with another woman during subsequent talks with Connie's closest friends. Connie told her closest friends everything, but they claimed she never brought up Sarah or the child's predicament. If she had discovered Rick was cheating, she surely would have notified them. Rick's circle of friends knew about his involvement with Sarah and the fact that she was pregnant, while Connie's friends remained unaware of these details. He confided in a friend how much he cherished Sarah and how worried he was that Connie would desert him. From the beginning, the investigating team as a whole was in a perilous situation. They kept this a secret from the public even though they believed Rick was responsible for the murder of his wife. Outside of law enforcement, everyone thought that an intruder had broken in, killed Connie, and left Rick injured. The people who were close to Rick did not even entertain the thought that he might have been involved in Connie's demise, and they wept with him. Although they had an obvious main suspect, the detectives did not want to stop looking into other possibilities. There was someone who might have wanted to harm the Debates. They and a contractor who worked on the house had a protracted legal dispute going on. Following many issues with the contractor's work and Connie's voiced concerns for her safety, Connie and Rick filed a small claims lawsuit against the individual. Connie had trouble dealing with the man, and her car had already been vandalized twice in 2015. She thought the contractor was responsible. The Debates installed their security system and bought guns as a result of these incidents. Even after Connie passed away, questions about her acquaintances included several references to the contractor. However, following this lead didn't lead to any useful information because the contractor had a clear alibi for the day of the incident and was not connected to the person Rick described as the invader. Even though no one but law enforcement assumed Rick was responsible for Connie's death, many others noticed something off about him. He did not appear to be mourning the way you might anticipate. Rick posted a question on the neighborhood group shortly after the incident asking everyone where they preferred to order takeout. This felt strange coming from a man who had just lately experienced the devastating loss of his wife. Investigators discovered several evident financial problems as they peeled back the layers of their lives. Connie felt like she was carrying all the burdens because money was leaving the household faster than it was entering. She disclosed to a close friend that she was considering getting a divorce from Rick and that she even had a file on her notes app named Why I Want a Divorce. The grounds included Rick's lying, his mistreatment of her, and the fact that he did not treat the boys well. In situations like these, money is frequently a driving force, and in mid-January 2016, detectives learned about 2 life insurance plans for Connie and Rick. Each policy was for a sizable $475,000 in total. It found out that Rick's life insurance had been terminated as a result of non-payment, leaving just Connie's as active coverage. Rick did not wait more than 5 days to collect Connie's insurance proceeds. A month after her death, he also earned $75,000 from her employer. The following year, detectives gradually developed their case against Rick Debate. They carried out a number of search warrants, examining Connie's Fitbit more so than Rick's phone records, bank documents, correspondence with outside parties, security system information, and communications. It was noted in the Fitbit data that Connie had become active at 7:52 a.m. Subsequently, there was a prolonged period of inactivity consistent with Connie driving to the IMCA. It was further stated in the search warrant that Connie's arrival at the IMCA was confirmed through surveillance cameras. Connie was reported to have returned home around 9:20 a.m. while she was on her way back. Between 9:37 a.m. and 9:43 a.m., Connie was observed to be stationary. Investigators think Connie was simply dozing off during this period. Connie continued to move about as usual for the following 20 minutes. Connie submitted videos from her phone to Facebook at this time, using an IP address that was associated with her residence. At 10:05 a.m., Connie's Fitbit recorded her as having last moved. This material offered conclusive proof that Connie's death had not occurred at the time Rick said it had. Connie was still breathing and moving at 10:05 a.m., an hour after Rick claimed to have seen the intruder kill her. On April 14, 2017, the authorities detained Rick after determining that they had enough evidence to convict him. He was accused of killing Connie, tampering with evidence, and making false statements to detectives. Rick entered a not guilty plea to the accusations. A 50-page affidavit provided by the police detailed Rick's relationship with Sarah, his inconsistencies, and the Fitbit data. The small town of Ellington was shocked to learn of Rick's imprisonment. Nobody had considered him to be in charge. Even Connie's close friends, with whom she had discussed her marital problems, believed that many individuals experienced troubles without it coming to this. $1 million was the amount of the bail, which he instantly posted. Despite the abundance of evidence, it took some time before the case went to trial. Before it began on April 5, 2022, there had been 2 postponements. Connie's case attracted a lot of media coverage from his arrest until his trial. It gained notoriety as a case that Fitbit solved, which Connie's family did not like. To them, getting a catchy headline seemed to detract from Connie's importance. Although it appeared that the prosecution had a strong case, the defense was able to present some incriminating evidence. 6 different locations in the house had unidentified DNA. This DNA matched Rick's account of the burglar who began in their closet, proceeded down the stairs, and ended up in the basement. The defense also cited Rick's exposure to gunshot residue as additional proof. There was not much of anything on him. If he had fired the gun, you could have anticipated seeing a lot more. In order to refute this, the prosecution pointed out that the test was conducted several hours after the trigger was pulled, which meant that his hands may have easily been washed or wiped during that time. From the beginning, the prosecution made its motive apparent. Because of Sarah's pregnancy and Connie's consideration of leaving him, Rick's life was disintegrating all around him. Time is passing, pressure is building, the kid is on the way, and the defendant's darkest fears are likely to come true, said attorney Matthew C. Jadansky to the jury. Following a 5-week trial on May 10, 2022, the jury deliberated for 3 hours before reaching a verdict. All allegations against Richard DeBate resulted in his conviction. After 6.5 difficult years, Connie and her family at last received justice. Judge Karine Klatt imposed a 65-year prison term. She described the crime as a cruel, cunning, and unfathomable act. Only 1 year separated her sentence from the maximum punishment. It is safe to predict that Richard will spend the remainder of his days in prison, even though his attorney did indicate they would file an appeal. Judge Klatt came to know Connie during the trial. She was a devoted mother, a dedicated worker, and many people's best friends. As Judge Klatt expressed, the absence of Connie undoubtedly has a negative impact on the world. Thanks for watching.